Hi everyone, welcome to our channel. So this is the part 4 of this series NestJS and Angular CRUD example. Now we try to implement a HTTP GET endpoint at our NestJS application, and then we try to consume that API in our Angular application. Okay, on receiving successful response, that response will be rendered on the UI of the Angular pages. Okay, so inside of the service, we know we have to write all the logic for interacting with our database, right? So now here we are going to implement a method for fetching the all documents from the MongoDB. Okay, so let's create a method. It will be asynchronous. A get all method, and it's going to return an array of our superheroes. So it will be a promise because of asynchronous, right? Okay, so of type superheroes, and here we are going to return. And we know this superhero model will have capability to interact with our superheroes collection in the MongoDB. So we will use it. So this dot superhero model dot find. Okay. So this find method will fetches the all the documents from the MongoDB collection. Okay, and dot execute. So it's going to execute the query. Okay, very simple. Just our supermodel find method fetches all the data and execute. This will be a query gets executed. Okay, now let's create a controller. Okay, in our superheroes module, and that controller will consume this method and then return the response to the clients whomever invokes our NestJS API. Okay, so to create the controller in our superheroes model, so command is like nest space G for generate space CO. CO represents controller, okay? And simply specify the controller name, okay? And I don't want any spec files, no spec. Okay, now this superheroes controller will automatically added into this superheroes module folder. Okay, so let's run the command. Okay, here you can see superheroes controller got created, right? So let's go there. Okay, so this is a normal class. To make it a controller, it should be decorated with the controller decorator that loads from the nestjs/common. And inside of this controller, we pass a string, right? So this will be the part of the URL. Okay, so we are defining route here. So all these things automatically generated by nestjs CLI. Okay, now in this controller, let's first inject our service. Okay, okay, injected the service. So we can consume the our superhero service in our controller. Now let's create a action method. Okay, I will name it like get all. Okay, and it should be decorated with at the rate get attribute. Okay, so this get attribute makes our action method executes only for HTTP get request. Okay, and if you want to specify more URL, so this is part of the URL, right? Slash, if you want to specify something, you can specify here. So by default, if our controller have single at the rate get decorated action method, then we no need to explicitly specify the route. But we have more than one, then we must specify the route. Okay. Now I can simply return this dot superheroes dot get all. Okay. This method automatically return this response as 200 status. That means successful response. Okay. So my endpoint, get endpoint for fetching all records from the MongoDB is ready. Let's run and test whether our endpoint giving us results or not. Okay. So we know the command npm start. So application runs successfully. You can see our endpoint is generated in the console. So if I go to browser, so localhost, and we know the port number 3000 slash superheroes. See, I am getting data from my MongoDB collection. We have inserted one test record, right? That here underscore ID automatically written in the response by the our API. Okay, so this ID is automatically generated at the MongoDB collection. Okay, some unique identifier. So now I am ready with my API. Now I have to implement the logic to consume this API in my application. And once I got successful response, that response must be painted on the UI. Okay. So let's go to our Angular application. So first, uh, this is our Angular application, right? So first, let me create a component. Okay, simple component like all superheroes. Okay, and I am going to that component as my home route component. Okay, first let's create the component. Okay, for creating the component, we have Angular CLI command like ng base generate. So don't confuse with Nest CLI commands and Angular commands because every JavaScript based CLI commands almost look same. Okay. Through practice, we can habituated to them. Okay. So here is ng. In Nest application, we use Nest. Yes. I want component, right? Component. Okay. So now I want to create a all super component, right? So that I want to create one more parent folder like superhero so that I can create any component that related to superheroes under it. So specify the folder name superheroes. So if the folder is not already exist, then our CLI command automatically creates. Okay. Now let's specify the name of our component. All hyphen super heroes. And I don't want any test files. So I can specify a flag like hyphen hyphen skip hyphen tests. Okay. Now run the command. Okay, now we know our Angular component means three files it will contain component.ts file, component.html, component.css. So my all superheroes component created and app module also updated. Let's check what happening. Okay, if you go here, you can see a superheroes folder. In that I am having all superheroes folder. In that I am having component files, all superhero component. Okay, and if I go to app module, my component got all automatically declared in the declarations array. Okay, so if because of CLA, all some boilerplate code automatically happening. Otherwise, we have to create each file individually and we have to import them here. So that is the benefit of CLA. Most of the things, most of the startup things, it's going to do by itself, and it will help help us a lot. Okay, now I having also previous component, right? So I want to configure home route to this component. For that, I have to go to app routing module. Okay, here currently there is no routes created, right? So let's add a route. Okay, path. Path means we have to specify the route. I am mentioning home path, right? Home path is nothing but empty. Okay, domain with the domain landing page. Okay, home page. So for that, we have to register the component. I want to load all heroes component. Okay. Now let's run and test because if you go to all superheroes component.html, there is some example text like paragraph all superhero works. So if our routing configuration is good, then this should be rendered. Okay. Now let's run our application. We know command to run our application ng serve. So our application is up and running. Let's test it. So we know Angular port is runs under 4200. See here, all superhero works. So this is the HTML inside of our all superheroes component that is rendering, but because we configured home page to that component. Okay, so next let me create a model for my API response. We have a API response, right? Let's create a model. Okay, so because we are Angular is uses TypeScript, right? More type safety. So we have to define types for every response or model, everything. Okay, let's create a model. So I want to create this model inside of this superheroes folder. Okay, so command is like ng generate. So in general, response model, we always prefer to use the interface. Okay, and where I want to create inside of the superheroes folder. Right, what is I now after that specifying the folder path, we have to specify the file name we want to create. So I want to file name as superheroes only. Okay, so this is the folder and this is the interface name. Okay, let's run it. Okay, you can see superheroes.ts file got created. If we look at the folder structure, now it is, you can see under the superheroes folder we have superheroes.ts file, and here is our model. Now we have to populate the properties of this model exactly equal to this response model. Okay, so id string name string hours string franchise measure. Okay, our response model is ready. Now, in general, in Angular application also, any API calls logic must be created inside of the service file. Okay, so you can see most of the files in NestJS and Angular are similar because they both use TypeScript as their coding language. Okay, so here also we have to create the service file. So let's open terminal. So command is like ng generate, and we want to create a service, right? Service, and where I want to create inside of the superheroes folder and specify the name of your service file. I will give same name, superheroes. Okay, so how it will create means inside of the superheroes folder, super-heroes dot service dot CLI file gets created. Okay, so I don't want any spec files. Skip tests. Okay, file got created successfully. If I look at folder structure inside of the superheroes, now I have superheroes dot service file. Okay, so now here we can implement the our logic for invoking the API call. Okay, so to invoke the API call, Angular provides one object like HTTP client instance. So let's inject it. Okay, private HTTP client. Okay, so let's import the namespace. Import from @Angular slash common slash HTTP. So here we will have HTTP client. Okay. So to use this HTTP client, we have to import HTTP client module. So let's go to app module.ts, and in the imports array, let's import the HTTP client module. Okay. So HTTP client module that also loads from Angular common HTTP. Okay. So let's get back to our service. Okay. Now I'm going to create a method. that going to consume my get API. Okay, so I will create a method like get, okay, return. So I can use this.http client instance. So HTTP, it will have all types of HTTP request methods. So mine is get method, right? HTTP get, right? So I have to use get. Okay. And here I can specify the response type also. We know the response type superheroes. It will get collection of superheroes as a response. Okay. We are just typecasting. And here we have to pass our API URL. We know our API URL, right? Copy this, paste it over here. Okay, so now I have successfully created my uh, API call invocation logic, right? Now the final thing pending, that is in our all superheroes component, I have to get this API call, and after receiving successful response, I have to bind it to the UI. So go to all components API call TS file. Okay, so first let's inject our service here, private superhero service. Okay, superhero service. Okay, now I want to create a variable, and that variable I am going to store the API response, so that I am going to use that variable in my HTML component HTML file and try to render the data inside of it. Okay, let me create a variable like superheroes. Okay, let's define its type, collection of array. Initially let's pass the empty array collection. Okay, so here you can observe our app component inheriting on init. That means we have to implement the ng on init. So this ng on init is nothing but a lifecycle method, Angular lifecycle method. This gets invoked once the component got invoked. This gets executed once the component is executed. Okay. So in this method, we have to call our API. So instead of creating all logic here, let's create a separate method and call that method inside of it. Okay. So let's create a method like get all. Okay. So this dot superhero service dot get method. We have created get method, right? So we are calling this get method. Okay. So to read the response from the API call, we must subscribe it. Okay. And it's going to have a arrow function where it's going to receive the response data. So here now I got once the API is successful, all the data is subscribed into this data variable. Now I can assign the data to my this dot superheroes variable. Okay, so my TS logic completed, and but it should be invoked once the component is invoked, right? So we should call inside of the ngOnIt method. Okay, so we are good with TS file. Let's go to HTML file. So all superheroes component, let's remove this, and I'm going to use bootstrap container and give some margin top 2 pixels. Okay, so I want to display each item from the API in a card, bootstrap card. For that, go to bootstrap website. Okay, and go to docs and go to cards, and at the bottom we will have a cards with spacing. Okay, so I want to have this design. So let's copy this. Okay, and paste it inside of it. Okay, so all these columns are duplicated, right? For example, so what we are going to do, we are going to loop them using the Angular ng for. So let's remove the static calls, because we are dynamically loop and render them. So let's keep only one uh, column. Okay, and to loop any content in Angular, we have a directive like star ng for. Okay, so this is going to loop the items in the array object. Okay, let item of. So here we have to specify the component variable. What is our component variable? Superheroes, right? Where we store our API response. Okay, we are going to use that variable. So once we loop it, it will, for every loop, one item will be popped from this superhero array object, and that will be stored in this template variable item. Okay, so like that, each item in the loop will be rendered. So once loop started, each object sits into the item, right? So we can use item to render the content. So here, for rendering data dynamically, we have to use flower brackets, double brackets. Okay, inside of it, we can give expressions or dynamic properties so that when the application is rendered, content is dynamically replaced there. Okay, so we have to use a double braces that we call string interpolation binding. Okay, so item dot, I have image URL property, right, in the response. Okay, okay, and here I am going to give the name of the superhero. So everything we can get from the item dot. Okay, so here I will bind the superhero powers. So powers, so for our basis item dot powers. Okay, and I want to display franchise as well. So for that, let's copy this p tag at the top. Okay, so here I want to bind franchise. Okay, so item dot franchise. Okay, like this we have to bind. So for binding, we have to use flower braces. Okay, for looping, we have to use the star ng for directive. Now I am done with my logic. My read operation is completed both at the NestJS and in my Angular application. Now let's test them. Okay, so make sure both the applications are running. So here my Angular application is running, and here my NestJS application is running. Okay, so if I reload Angular application, content is not rendering. Why? Let's see. So some error happened. So if you observe, the error is course issue. Okay, course issue means cross origin issue. Because why it is happening? Okay, let me reload again. So here API call is going, but it is rejected by the server. That is course error. Means if you observe, our API is running at localhost 3000. Our Angular is running is localhost 4200. That means they are different domains. When an API is trying to consumed by the different client domain, then it will get rejected. Okay, so for that our API must allow our client application. That means we have to enable the CORS at our NestJS application. So go to main.ts file. See, in the NestJS application, the error happening because API is rejecting because hey, you are not my domain. I don't know who you are. So I'm not going to give my response to you. That's why it is rejecting my client, right? So if I enable CORS, so enable CORS, okay, like this in main.ts file. After the this line app equal to nest factory create, just add this line. Now this says our nestjs application can deliver to any kind of domain. So our nestjs application can be consumed by any application. If you want to restrict at our domain level also, you can do that. So for now I am not going to explain that. So for now what I am doing, nestjs application will serves our Angular client application. Okay, let's rerun the application again, NestJS application. So application is running successfully. Let's reload our Angular page, and you can see data got rendered. Image is little big, right? So for now, let's just ignore. And our content also rendering inside of the card. If you observe the network calls, our super API is 200 successful. Now our NestJS API accepted the request from our Angular application, and you can see API and request is get request and status is 200. That means success status. Inside of the response, in preview, we can see the response. So this is the single object that is sending from the server, and we rendered it successfully. Okay, let's give some height to this image to look little better. It like 250. Okay, somewhat better. So that means we are successfully reading our API and rendering the response in our Angular application. Okay. Next, we are going to implement the create operation. Means in NestJS API, we are going to create a create endpoint, and we are going to create a form in our Angular application. So whenever the form submits, the create API will be consumed and data will be saved into our MongoDB. Okay. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope this video has delivered some useful information to you all. If you like the content, please do support me by subscribing to my channel. Soon we are going to meet with new content. Until then, signing off.